Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's the 28th of July, 2025. This video is going to be a bit longer than normal, unfortunately, due to the topic of conversation. It's just important info that is currently being drip fed to you and I. And when I say drip fed, I mean the process governments go through when suddenly sort of informing its public of what's coming. I just want to, all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a web browser and we'll just go through some stuff together. Okay. Um, Right. Civil defence, stockpiling, home guard, and immigration. Right. History has a nasty habit of repeating itself. However, we should learn from it. Are we now seeing governments stockpiling? The UK government rolling out a new defence strategies in preparation for war. Are governments? I'm not too sure about other governments. When I say governments, I've got to go along the lines of the UK government at the moment. But is the UK government orchestrating the movement of illegal immigrants into the UK and other governments across European countries? Are we also now seeing the government talking about new civil defence plans for the UK and reigniting the Home Guard strategy? See, these are new levels of preparation, guys. Things that the governments seem to be rekindling. And if these aren't a sign, then I just don't know what, I don't know what is. We're we've got to look at logic and signs through common sense. And unfortunately, there just isn't much of that out there. So we're going to be covering five topics here. And they will all kind of fall into place as this session goes on because they all kind of mean the same thing. So the UK and EU government stockpiling, an overview of the UK's defence strategy. We'll have a look at that. We have to touch on immigration right now because it's relevant to what I think is coming. And we have to mention the UK's civil defence plans because that includes what you and I would end up having to do if we were going to contribute to the war at home. And with that, we'll finish off with the UK's plans for what we call a new home guard. So basically, what that is, that's civilians and volunteers protecting our country whilst the armed forces are out there on the front lines. Okay, so that's all. I'm going to cover those, but they are all that they all kind of intertwine and all link into each other. The right, let's just start with this. I just want to have a quick look at this, or for us to have a quick look at this. Right, so the EU, or European Commission, has unveiled its strategy for stockpiling and preparing itself, as in the government, on what they're now doing in preparation for war with Russia. It's all been plastered across the mainstream platforms, but as normal, 90% of the populations in said European countries just they'll simply read the headline title of those articles and then they'll just move back onto whatever entertaining sort of platforms they use, such as TikTok, Insta, or whatever else they do. So, long story short, for anyone who's not been listening to what the EU are now telling us, other countries are already doing this, especially countries closer to the Russian border, such as Finland, Sweden, and also Norway. They seem to be leading the Europeans in emergency planning. They're encouraging citizens to stockpile essential items. Advice for the likes of you and I on the ground. They are emphasizing the importance of you and I being prepared at home. There's several countries that have got government-led initiatives for stockpiling food. What else is there? Medicine and other essential supplies, either for emergencies and or wartime situations. I'm going to be brutally honest with you guys. The current hype about stockpiling is because of war. But part of the drip feeding process is to sort of dilute this information just to prevent any kind of panic and to tell you the governments are preparing for, let's say, I don't know, another possible pandemic. So when you go through these articles, they're not, point blank saying it's war and conflict. they'll throw in things like possible pandemics and or preparing for other disasters such as floods, fires due to climate change, blah 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 bullshit. So that all we're saying here, guys, is that let's just go across. Hang on, let's just see. Earlier this year, the European public were urged to stockpile enough food, water, and essentials for 72 hours to cope with a military attack. Okay, to cope with a military attack, natural disaster, power cut, or major industrial accident. Okay, so they kind of mixed it all up there. Let's not dig into that. Okay, they're asking us to prepare. We have who's this? Switzerland. Yeah, so Switzerland have a long history of stockpiling and is mandated by law for certain industries within Switzerland, with a strong emphasis on individual citizens' preparedness. Um, their government they encourage and enforce individual preparedness. Then you know, obviously, if they're encouraging that to their citizens, and that's going to make life a whole lot easier for those governments, one less problem for them to worry about. Now, Germany, who have highlighted strong concerns about potential conflict, has updated its civil defence framework. So as the UK and others, that they've all done that now. If you ask why we're being told to stockpile, you'll find mixed answers, obviously, depending on where that information is coming from. Some will say that it's because of the rise in geopolitical tensions, and there's plenty of that going on, certainly with the ongoing Russian-Ukraine war, as well as tensions only just still getting started in the Middle East. When I say getting started, it's they've been in conflict for years and years and years, but it's a new round of conflict. Anyway, let's leave that. That's not what this is about. But also there's going to be concerns for the potential for, I don't know if you've heard of this, guys. If you haven't, go out and Google it and just find out. But it's grey zone attacks. Those are actions that fall between peace and war, such as hybrid warfare in the form of cybersecurity threats, which you would have all heard of, sabotage. So that'll be, undersea cabling and various things like that, and also assassinations or assassination attempts on, tier one personnel. Other governments may emphasize extreme weather events first, followed by possible conflict. What I'm trying to say here, guys, is that different governments are telling you to prepare, but their reasoning is different to, let's say, their neighbours. So now, if we're talking about the UK, extreme weather events only come into play depending on where you live. So, for example, here in the UK, they'll be talking about floods, and let's be honest, if you've been living in an area prone to flooding, your house has been built anywhere near a water table, or it's perched up, amongst a nice scenic, tranquil village, with a nice river running through it, a village surrounded by hills, and in a part of the country where there's just a lot of rain, then you will be familiar with flooding, and shouldn't need telling how to prepare for something like that, guys, because you'll already know. Um, and then there's wildfires, or that narrative that the UK government like to throw into their documents and literature. Now, again, depending on whereabouts in the world you live, many parts of Europe have seen an uptick in wildfires, either starting accidentally, intentionally by somebody, or ignited through extreme heat caused by climate change. See, when advising to prepare for the extreme weather backdrop, let's call it a backdrop, I'm not buying it. But remember, guys, I live in the UK. We always sit here moaning and talking about the weather, and of course, yeah, climate change is changing weather patterns. But I'm just not buying the reason why governments are stockpiling and everybody's supposed to get 72-hour emergency packs, and we're all supposed to prepare. I'm not buying it that we're supposed to be preparing for fires and floods. Okay, most other countries across Europe are telling their publics that they should be preparing for emergencies such as power outages, water utility outages, and other cyber attacks. Now, all of those are hybrid warfare. They are things that will happen if you've got an enemy attacking your critical infrastructure, and also the possibility of conventional attacks. See, here in the UK, the government they are emphasising preparations for floods, fires, and it's just quite frankly, it's embarrassing, and it's insulting everybody else's intelligence. Now, of course, they don't want to be scaring people and causing panic, but on top of that, not being spoken about either is the likes of China, Iran, North Korea, and also terrorists closer to home. So the immediate threat for the Europeans has to be Russia. So you'll find that a lot of my videos will emphasize Russia as a threat because that is an immediate threat for us here in the UK and across the whole of Europe. So the stockpiling, um, actually, when you jump online, guys, obviously, when you when you're going to be presented with all of this mainstream stuff, they're all saying pretty much the same thing, and but just in slightly different ways. So regardless of how they're saying it, there's a lot of information coming out of this drip feeding tap at the moment. Let's call it drip feeding because it's the real information, but they've only given you little bits of it. But regardless of what other people are saying on various social media platforms, and I'm even going to throw myself under the bus here, regardless of what I'm saying now, and also on any of my other videos, we have and are still being told as individuals to prepare for a minimum of 72 hours. And regardless of the reasons why, before the Ukraine war, back on the 24th of February 2022, none of this was ever mentioned. Now I know climate change has come into the spotlight way before the Ukraine war. So if it's floods and fires and all the rest of it, why now? And now on top of that, you've got the EU telling you your governments are now stockpiling. But let me just make one thing clear here, guys. They are not stockpiling and preparing to save you or I. So don't be thinking that, don't think for 1 minute, oh, fuck it. I don't have to prepare because, my government or the government that I rely on so heavily are stockpiling for an SHTF, and they're going to come and save us. Honestly, people get that silly idea out of your heads quickly, and because they're not going to be okay. They're going to be stockpiling for people services, people in services, whether it's emergency, you know what I mean? It's not going to be for the likes of you and I, hence the reason why they're telling us to do our own preparations. So that was the stockpiling. Okay, just bear that one in mind. I don't want to talk about this one too much. I'll tell you for why, because there are videos out there, there's other channels out there that have spoken about this. This is a long document, it's quite detailed. Well, the document was released a month ago, so it's been out there on the channels for about a month now. So I'm not going to go into it too much. It's a public document, but the thing is, it's 144 pages in total, and the truth is, 90% of the UK's population aren't interested. They don't want to know, and quite frankly, they don't give a shit. But for those of you that haven't got your heads up your asses, I'm just going to summarize the document and just highlight just a couple of the bits that are going to be useful for you and I. This will all fall into place, okay? So we've had the stockpiling. Now the document is 144 pages long. I've read through it all, so me and my family can better sort of prepare because I do give a shit about surviving and keeping my family safe, and now I'm not in favour of many things that the government say, but there are pieces of information out there where they're point blank telling us. They go on through this document. They talk about large financial investments into the UK's military across the army, the air force, and the navy, pumping millions into technology recruitment, equipment, and quite frankly, the list goes on in this document. But you guys aren't interested in that, but instead you're going to be interested in why. I'm interested in why this document has been published. A lot of it's obvious, and a bit of common sense and logic. Unfortunately, there's not much of that out there. But the UK has been on a war footing since Russia invaded Ukraine, and they're not alone. All 31 other NATO member countries are now in the same position. And to be fair, many European countries were on a war footing way before the UK. Guys, the Ukraine war has been raging now for 1,247 or 248 days, 3.5 years since the 24th of February 2022. So I know most people in the UK think that the Ukraine is a million miles away, when in fact it would take me just 21 hours to drive 1,300 miles into Western Ukraine. So nevertheless, unless it's happening in your hometown, there's nothing to worry about. That seems to be the concept. But on this document, I'm just going to pull out a couple of things here. Right. When you read through this defense review, Russia is mentioned 33 times. There's something, there is something with that number 33 popping up, but it's the opening pages. And we have Starmer saying something. But guys, I'm not even going to bother, wasting any sort of airtime on this idiot. So we're gonna skip past that. Um, What we do have is the UK Secretary of State. He says in his opening paragraph, let me just highlight it. Okay, this is only on page 5. I'm just going to read this out. Okay, so the world has changed. The threats we now face are more serious and less predictable than at any time since the Cold War, including war in Europe. So these are the bits that you need to be looking at. War in Europe, growing Russian aggression, new nuclear risks, and daily cyber attacks at home. So those are the four key. This paragraph is really all you need to know. That's really the message I need to get across to you. This is the UK Secretary of State in his opening paragraph. So the threats that we now face are more serious and less predictable than any time since the Cold War, including war in Europe. Okay, guys, that's what's coming. Whether anyone likes it or not, that's actually what's happening. Growing Russian aggression, well, we know that. New nuclear risks, well, we know that as well. And I know a lot of people will be throwing their heads in the sand and just pretending that I'm talking a load of bollocks. And the daily cyber attacks at home, well, we know that's happening. We see it in the news. The UK, GCHQ. If anyone doesn't know what GCHQ, they're up there in Cheltenham. It's a ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, information gathering, secret service, whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's an intelligence hub. They've announced that Russia or a Russian state-backed groups were actively embedding themselves into UK power stations, internet providers, and also water treatment plants, supposedly placing what they call kill switches to actively be triggered in the event of a conflict. So for anyone that isn't understanding that piece, just let me explain quickly. Russian operatives, similar to sleeper cells, who have probably they've probably been living in the country for years, establishing a level of education within the British system, gaining qualifications and a ticket to work in places such as the national power stations, water treatment facilities, and telecommunications companies. Now having a level of responsibility that grant them access to those systems and equipment and the ability to plant kill switches. This could be a dead man switch or an emergency shutdown system. They're designed actually to shut down sort of operations or critical systems. So kill switches are factored into facilities to actually fight against a terrorist attack. But if the person working for the company is a terrorist and has planted, let's say, for example, their own kill switch, which could then be in the form of, as an example, a device that can quickly be plugged into the network and infrastructure to deploy a massive virus, bringing operations and systems down, but they have full control over that. GCHQ and the government are saying that these adversaries or personnel, sleeper cells or whatever, are highly likely already embedded within our critical infrastructure in terms of the companies and everything else. Okay. There are concerning suggestions throughout this document saying that the EU, no, not the EU, let me just see, it's the UK. and parts of the EU. Right, so let's just stick with the UK. They say in parts that the UK isn't ready for defending itself. We hear that on mainstream. We hear people talking about it. Oh yeah, if we go to war, we're done. We haven't got this. We haven't got that. La 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 la. But it doesn't really state what we can't defend against. So does that mean Russian boots on our streets, a cyber attack on national, like on critical infrastructure on a national scale? Or worse still, a nuclear attack from one of the many submarines swimming around, UK international waters at the moment. There are various military personnel sort of stated back in 2022 after the invasion that the UK and other NATO countries would need. Back then, they were saying that we would need 3 years to prepare for war with Russia, that is. That was 3.5 years ago, guys. European countries have and continue to invest billions into their own defense plans and also injecting billions into the Ukraine just to fend off Russia up until the point NATO are ready. See, NATO are not quite ready. But when they are, that's it. That's when it's happening. So I've done a couple of videos on these various subjects. I've done a video on UK defence and deterrent. There's one that are NATO ready. What threat is Russia to us here in the UK and Europe? What else is there? Does the UK even have an army and equipment to sort of fight any kind of war on this scale? And the list goes on. A couple of points I need to sort of get across again. When people say we have no army to fight Russia, nor the equipment, when this kicks off, guys, it will be NATO, not the UK against Russia. So NATO consists of 32 countries of all different sizes. There's some smaller and there's some bigger than the UK. Collectively, NATO can call upon 3.5 million troops, okay, quite quickly, and a shitload of military assets. So forget about UK numbers. The UK, alongside France, are the only two countries in Europe at the moment that have got a nuclear capable umbrella, let's call it, or infrastructure, with approximately 500 nuclear warheads between us. You're going to be hearing, or probably not so much now, but there was breaking news last week where the US are sending nukes to the UK. And again, this is the first time since 2008. I think that's what they're saying. This isn't breaking news, guys. And the narrative that's being spun up around these nuclear weapons coming from America to the UK is another load of bollocks. The UK have just purchased 12 F-35A stealth fighter jets from the US. These are tier one aircraft designed to carry and deploy when they talk about these nuclear bombs, they're talking about the B-61-12 nuclear capable gravity bombs. There is no point in purchasing these jets without the nuclear capable missiles. It's like buying a brand new Land Rover Defender without the spare wheel on the back. The Land Rover Defender is likely to use a spare wheel at some point in the future due to, the vehicle or what the vehicle's been sort of designed to be used for. And the same for the F-35As. If they need to deploy nukes on Russian targets, then they need to be able to do so. Okay, so there's the problem is with mainstream. Okay, they're just giving you this clickbait stuff, and it's just kind of they give you a little bit of the story. They never give you the full story, and it just gets everyone going on a wild one. Right, moving on quickly on this document because it's a long document, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. What is this, page 33? So technologies. I just want to cover this because this is quite either interesting or important. So technologies within the armed forces are now being redefined. Focusing now, and you'll hear this is the new kind of buzz, isn't it? Is AI this, AI that, AI everything. But anyway, they are focusing now on AI, machine learning, and data science. They're also looking at robotics and autonomy, increased use of increased use of unmanned platforms, enhanced precision weapons with greater accuracy. We've got directed energy weapons. That's the sort of stuff, right? So these directed energy weapons, it's the sort of stuff that you and I would have seen back in the day on Star Wars or any of those movies. UK's version of this is called a Dragonfire, which is a laser concentrated weapon. There's also big investment going into hypersonic missiles, space-based capabilities. That's going to be a lot of satellites, things like that. And then we've got quantum computing used to break encryption sets, making secure communications, reducing the reliance of GPS technologies, and the list will go on. We can't forget about the cyber attacks becoming so much more common on critical infrastructure here in the UK and across the whole of Europe. But that was just to emphasize where the new level of warfare is kind of ending up or going. That's the direction it's going in. Right. For anyone that thinks that the UK isn't on a war footing, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening, guys. Anyway, I don't want to go off a track, but the reason why the UK's military has decreased and has done so actually since the early 1990s is because it was the end of the Cold War. The threat level back then came right down. There were significant cutbacks across the Air Force and Army here in the UK, but the Royal Navy actually sustained a level of power. See, the UK opted to increase its own nuclear capability as a deterrent against the likes of Russia. But that clearly and simply, that isn't going to work today. Guys, the UK government have been investing heavily in military assets for its own forces and stockpiles, as well as deploying loads into the Ukraine. There are military vehicles rolling off of the production lines as we speak, soldiers being recruited with ammunition and munition factories or manufacturing plants in overdrive. See, if anyone living in the UK was to sort of take a few steps back, and I'll kind of try and encourage people to do this, just take a few steps back and just look at the bigger picture. You'll see that our government in the public domain seem to be failing. Okay, so all we hear on the news is just that the government can't do this and they can't do that. Everything's either breaking or broke. So the truth is, the UK are on a war footing, and that's not new news. As Richie Sunak, I think, told the entire UK last year, back in July, we've been preparing for war since 2022, and that, ladies and gents, costs money, which means there is going to be less investment into various other public services across the country. And as you can see, the war machine is in full swing with, the following nationwide defence industry across the whole country in action. So when we look at this, we can see at the moment that there's shipbuilding in Scotland, munitions and ship manufacturing in Northern Ireland. We got submarines in Cumbria, armoured fighting vehicles coming off the production line in Wales. We got helicopters in Somerset, space cluster, that's going to be satellites, everything. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is you and I don't see any of this, okay? But this is what's happening, okay? The war machine is in full swing. So the UK and European governments have an agenda, and whether you like it or not, it's war. When we hear on the TV here in the UK about the what is it, post office scandal compensation or the blood scandal compensation, the failing NHS and the junior doctors strikes, the failing water utility providers, the train providers, falling back into the hands of the government, and the list goes on of all the failings. The government don't actually give a shit about any of that lot at the moment. And no disrespect to anyone enduring the backlash of any of those failings that I've just mentioned. But the truth is, it's either paying out all these compensation and sorting out these failing services, or it's funding the war machine. I mean, they're doing both. But what I'm trying to say is, if you go into war and there's a war machine to fund and to get up and running, that has to come first, guys. If we're not ready for it, then forget about compensations and shit like that. That's forget it. You've got to forget about that. Okay, we're all going into survival mode. So most people won't be able to get their heads around this concept because they simply don't believe that the war has already started and the rest of Europe are about to engage. So in 2025 or that 2025 defence review, there are 62 outlined recommendations in preparing Britain for war. The main military focus is with the UK's Royal Navy, looking at expanding on what they call hybrid drone navy. So remember, the UK is an island and it has to be protected. Ironic, really, as we're letting over 1,000 illegal immigrants across the channel in rubber boats without being sort of unchallenged or being challenged, or they are coming across unchallenged, whatever way you want to say it. But what I'm trying to say is, we're an island and we. That's why I'm saying the governments are actually orchestrating the movement of human beings into and out into this country. Okay, if we wanted to stop it, we would, and that's it. But it's a numbers game, guys. The UK currently have I think in this document it said 8 to 10 operational submarines. I'm not sure. I can't find that online. Eight is the most at the moment. But they're increasing that to 22 nuclear capable submarines, the nuclear deterrent again. So this is concerning because we're talking about Russia, who are said to have over 5,000 nuclear warheads. Now, I would be looking at investing billions into defense also, and I'm sure that the government and this strategy and all the plans are going to incorporate defense. One of the strategic reasons for the Navy expanding is due to something called I think it's GI UK gap. Let me bring that up, guys, because GI UK. I'm just going to bring up an image. This is something I kind of picked up on only sort of last week, to be honest. So it's only fair that I'll sort of mention this to you. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I need to emphasize what the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe are doing in preparation for this war. So the GI UK, right, let me just go back. Yeah, let me just, I can't increase that. Anyway, GI UK gap. Basically, what that stands for is Greenland, Iceland, and the UK, which is, it's the stretch of water, as you can see. The UK, it's the stretch of water between the UK and Iceland, and the gap between Iceland and Greenland. Um, and it's up to the UK now to protect that gap in the Atlantic. Basically, what happens, guys, is that you're going to get Russian traffic coming through these two gaps. Your Northern Fleet, Russian Northern Fleet, and any other sort of a lot of the Navy, Russian Navy, will come in from the north, and they will have to pass through these two gaps. So it's the UK Royal Navy responsibility to police and protect that corridor. Let's call it a corridor. There's two choke points. The UK also have control over, any sort of possible threats coming in from Russia through the Mediterranean Sea as well. So I won't go through the route that they would take, but it's kind of, long story short, the Sea of Azov. You would possibly come under the Kerch Bridge by Crimea into the Black Sea, passing through the Turkish Strait, which joins the Black Sea to the Med. So that would be Istanbul. However, with Turkey being a NATO member and also the many sort of maritime vessel restrictions on that strait, this route would be, I think I would guess, a lot more challenging for the Russians to get through. There's depth restrictions, and it can be quite shallow coming through Istanbul, which would affect submarines and large vessels, as well as bridge clearance regulations. So coming through the GI UK Strait near the UK, Iceland and Greenland would be a lot easier for Russia. Hence the reason for the UK now responsible for protecting it. The army. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to get through this quite quickly, but it will all fall into place. The army, unfortunately, they will receive the least amount of investment. However, they will be investing 6 billion on 6 new munition factories, which is what I mentioned earlier, which will procure 7,000 long-range missiles and a constant supply of shells. If that's not preparing for war, guys, then I don't know what is. The recruitment into the army will focus on recruiting an extra 30,000 soldiers to add to the current 70,000 over the next few years. The focus on a smaller army, though, is to recruit with the intention of making them all sort of 10 times more lethal. So each soldier will be 10 times more lethal. You know, basically what that means is they will be trained in technology such as drone warfare, drone swarms, and AI platforms. So they'll be highly knowledgeable in the high tech and the technology within warfare. As opposed to having 10 soldiers doing less responsible tasks. Right, final thing on this defence review. They state that the British Army is set to adopt a new military strategy called, or it's dubbed, 20-40-40, placing greater emphasis on autonomous warfare and drone technology. So this means 20, so the 20-40-40 means 20% crew platforms such as tanks and heavy equipment, things like that. 40% on high-end reusable autonomous systems such as autonomous drones. So those will be the ISR, or intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance drones, and that kind of stuff. And then you've got 40% on expendable consumables, single-use munitions, single-use drones, artillery shells, that kind of thing. Which means the UK's vision is to have 80% of its army unmanned. So that's where that's where the new warfare is going. It won't be just this country; it'll be other countries as well. So it's becoming high tech. Anyway, that's enough about the UK defence strategy review. I know there are some channels out there, they've covered the topic. I wanted to just cover a little bit about it whilst we're talking about World War III and how the UK and Europe are preparing for it. I'm going to move on quickly. This one might be of interest to some of you. Um, Only because it's been talked about mainstream social media platforms. I'm not going to be talking about what they're talking about, but we are going to talk about immigration. Just quickly, guys, and it is a topic of conversation across the whole of the UK at the moment, which I think, could be relevant to what's happening in Europe. If you've watched my videos, you'll know my take on this subject. If you haven't seen any of those videos, and in summary, I believe that the UK government, along with other governments, are orchestrating the movement of human beings from country to country. This is not new. Humans are a commodity. When they say we're just a number, that's exactly what they mean. And it's it's a commodity that's been going on for thousands of years. So from slavery to sex trafficking, only today humans are being sort of shipped in for other uses and purposes. So it depends on which country they're going into. So the UK, in my view, could stop all immigrants coming into the UK tomorrow. But they won't be because, right, let me just explain this. We're going to go through some of the numbers. But we lost 350,000 EU and non-EU workers who went home after Brexit, and another 170,000 following the pandemic, affecting it will be your key industries. Okay, we lost 520,000, or over 500,000 people, EU and non-EU people, following those two events. Actually, let me just bring this up. This might be easier. Um, God, can we zoom into that? Can we zoom in? I need to zoom into that. Sorry, guys, I just want to zoom into that. No, too much. Right, that do. That do. That's going to have to do. Right. So, illegal immigrants. The main way for illegal immigrants to now enter the UK is via the small boats. And since 2021, we've had, these are the numbers. I'm going to go through them. We've got them on the screen. So 350,000 we lost after Brexit, and 170,000 after the pandemic. immigrants coming into the country on these boats in 2021, 28,000, 2022, 40. Anyway, over the last 5 years, we've had 169,900 or thereabouts. Numbers are slightly different depending on where you're looking for them. I know over the last week or the first 4 days of last week, 16 boats had crossed the channel successfully, bringing across 1,030 illegal immigrants in just 4 days. Some might say the numbers are slightly different. Again, like I say, depending on where you're going. However, since Brexit, there have been 167,000 or 169,000 that have come across to the UK in boats. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this, the numbers are nowhere near these, but there's another route. Okay, so these are just really the small boats. You can also have the immigrants entering the country via visa and not going back or overstaying their welcome or declaring asylum or just just going on the run and not returning home. We have to consider that the year end of 2024, 948,000 people migrated to the UK, whilst 517 emigrated. So that's 517 people, 517,000 people left, resulting in a net migration of 431,000. So it's nearly 500,000. So if we were to say that the UK has been trying to reclaim those 500,000 people that left, after Brexit and the pandemic, then we would have 431,000 net migration since then, still leaving a shortfall of 90,000, give or take. We can now factor in the 167,000 or the 169,000 that have come across on small boats over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. But since then, we now have 4 million working age adults in the UK claiming disability and incapacity benefits. This is an increase from 2.8 million in 2019. Many of those, obviously, as a result of COVID. But there is now a shortfall of British citizens of 1.2 million. And on top of that, there are a reported 10 million people of a working age receiving benefits. There's 13 million receiving a state pension, which is 22.8% of the UK claiming benefits. There are 21% of the population here in the UK who are not employed and are not actively seeking work. This is referred to online as it's referred to as economically inactive, whatever the fuck that means. That is 9.09 million people in this category. This will make sense in a minute, guys. As I've said before, we, as in humans, are a commodity. So as long as you're working and paying into the pot, the system will be there to look after you. But when we look at these services today, they're all breaking or broken, and they're unable to provide everyone with a good level of service anymore. And why is that? Because of the numbers that I've just given you. They're unsustainable. And that is the reason why governments are having to orchestrate the movement of additional resources into the country, whether you like it or not. There's too many people on benefits. There's too much money going out and not enough coming in. There is still jobs there that people can do, but feel that they're too good to do them. So, the system has to be fixed. But on top of that, I also believe that there are other purposes for these immigrants, obviously to plug, the workforces across many different industries. But I think, and again, guys, this is only my opinion, but I think that there is a civil defence purpose also, because the governments are currently preparing the countries for war. And what is one of the reasons why I'm talking, like basically what I'm saying, I'm going to move on to this subject in a minute, civil defence. But the reason why I'm talking about immigration and civil defence is because they're kind of interchangeable on this session. Okay, it'll make sense in a minute. Everyone out there at the moment aren't happy. They're protesting about the immigrants and they're kicking off. And I'm not sure why they're kicking off with the immigrants because it's not really their fault. It's the government's fault. But is it? See, the governments are there to run and manage the country. It's a system, it has to be kept afloat. A civil servant in London once said to me, this is going back 10 years ago. I've mentioned this in a couple of videos before, but civil servant, this was when 10 years ago, when everyone was finger pointing the Polish for taking our jobs. He said to me, the government doesn't care about the color of your skin nor the language that comes out of your mouth. So long as you can work and you're paying into the pot, that being tax, that's all that matters. And since he told me that, my entire outlook on immigration and the government has changed. Your government is responsible for all of this, but it's for a reason, and that is to keep the engine running, guys. As in this country right now, okay, it's breaking. It's on the surface, it seems to be breaking. Everything seems to be failing. But on top of that, the unfolding war isn't helping either. So unfortunately, guys, the war, in my view, again, this is only my opinion, it has to happen. Call it a reset or whatever you want to call it. It's a global reset. It's required for numerous reasons. If you get prepared and get through this shit, then you're going to be fine. Okay, you will be fine. It will be unpleasant at times, of course it will, and it won't be what you're used to. But you'll be fine if you're prepared for it. But please don't pretend that none of this isn't happening, guys. And there's nothing to worry about. I don't want any of you to be worrying, and the best way to sort of deal with that is just to get prepared. Finally. Sorry about this. I did say this was going to be longer than normal. Let me just put another spin on this employment chaos that we got in the UK at the moment. In the UK, there were 727,000 job vacancies between April and June of this year, so only 2 or 3 months back. This represents a decrease of, I think it's 56,000 or 7.2% compared to the previous quarter. Or I think that's 16% less than this time last year. Let's just say that. However, vacancy numbers have been declining for this is the National Statistics Department. So they've been saying it's declining for the last 36 consecutive periods. And the other issue we have is that there is, let's say, 1.67 million people in the UK who are unemployed. So if all 727,000 available jobs were taken, there would be, or there'd still be 873,000 people without a job or without work. So regardless of the amount of people flooding into the country, jobs have to be created, which can be, difficult during pre-war preparation. So the war will cause job losses across many industries. But war also creates jobs, as there's always money to be made out of somebody else's misfortune, unfortunately. Sorry to go on about these numbers, but once you understand statistics and the history and just some of the information, you'll better understand why certain things are happening around you, which is it's important and it's imperative for you preparing, guys. All I'm doing is I'm just pointing out these are facts. These are facts, and you have to look at them and see where this is all going. So whilst everybody's following the immigration protest narrative online at the moment, instead of finger pointing at the immigrants and all of the other reasons and excuses, just look at the bigger picture. The UK is struggling, and we have a war to contend with. We've lost entire workforces and we're struggling to replace them. There's job opportunities are sort of few and far between. And unfortunately, many of those 727,000 vacancies are jobs the British people just won't do, but are jobs that the immigrants will do. That further causes us a problem because, they're more, there's more of them coming into the country, not taking the jobs that we won't do. They're having the jobs. They're not taking jobs off of anyone. If you don't want to do the jobs, then that's it, they can. But ultimately, that's going to be placing more people on benefits for longer. And whose fault is that? We could go around in circles, but my point is, I believe the UK government are drafting in immigrants into the country for other war preparation reasons, as well as doing some of those normal jobs that nobody else wants to do. Right. So that's that bit. Okay. Now, I just want to move. This is next bit. It's just going to be a small section and then we'll finish off. Let's get rid of that. Right. So civil defence. Let me just give you a quick rundown. It's only it'll be very short. Okay. So civil defence back in the day for World War Two. We have to mention World War Two, guys, because all of these things that I'm talking about are all things that happened before World War Two in preparation for a world war. So we have to kind of look at history repeating itself, and is that what's actually happening now? That, in my view, that's what's happening. ARP. So back then it was the air raid precautions in 1939. At the beginning of World War Two, it was renamed the Civil Defence General Services. There were sections of people. They were responsible for dealing with first aid. There were wardens walking around the streets, making sure that there were no lights on in people's houses or their windows were blacked out, so enemy aircraft couldn't see. Towns and cities below. They were sort of looking after people. They were making sure people got to shelters as and when they needed to, putting out fires, again, first aid and stuff like that. Now, there were around 2 million of these people serving during World War Two in the Civil Defence General Services. And between 6 and 7,000 of those were actually killed during the war, performing different duties. There was also a youth section. So if you were between the ages of 15 and 18, you could volunteer for that. These guys used to be used as what they call runners or messengers in communications. So if a communications went down and a message needed to be delivered, these youngsters were sent off to, sort of take notes to, I don't know, an observation post or a military, war room or whatever it is. Each civil defence section was regional. And it was run and administered by your local councils. So many of the members worked part-time around their sort of day jobs or their day-to-day lives, depending on what jobs they were doing, if in fact they were working. They weren't paid for this. And it was disbanded just before the end of World War Two. We haven't had much in place since then, guys. But back in 2013, there was an individual which was an ex-forces guy. He decided to form what they called the Civil Defence Organisation, similar to the Civil Defence General Services, but it was called the Joint Civil Aid Corps, or the JCAC Volunteers. Guys, the reason why I'm talking about this is because I'll tell you, the government, as you can see on there, they're proposing a home guard and damn, I haven't got it on here. Anyway, the UK government are bringing back civil defence. That's it. So, if you want any more signs or anything like that, look, you've got to ask yourself that. Okay, it's okay them telling us that make sure you're prepared for floods and fires and that, but ask them why they're bringing back civil defence, because they need the likes of you and I, guys, to take up these responsibilities when the shit hits the fan. Okay, because they just haven't got enough soldiers and emergency service personnel and all the rest of it. Guys, when we go to war, when any country goes to war, we're all at war. You don't have to be wearing a uniform to be at war. Okay, the whole country has to come together, and you have to be resilient, and you all have to fight that war together. Okay, you have to support each other, and you have to do lots of stuff. So the civil defence plan in the UK, there's a new one coming out. I'm just going to skip down to the last bit now because I'm just conscious that I've been going on. Last but not least, moving on to, and this is important as well, guys. It's well, you probably haven't heard much about this. I hadn't really up until the point that I did, and then I started researching it. So there is something called the Home Guard, better known back in the day as the Local Defence Volunteers, LDV, which was a British volunteer military organisation formed in 1940 during World War Two. It served as a last line of defence against potential invasion. So that would have been from the Germans, primarily guarding vulnerable points and installations and just freeing up regular troops, to go off and do combat duties and stuff like that. It was comprised of men who were too old or too young or otherwise sort of ineligible for regular military service, and better known as, you've probably heard of them, the Dad's Army. I'm I was going to go through the evolution of the initial role. I mean, the initial role basically was local defence. It was guarding vital infrastructure like power stations, communication lines, and transportation hubs. They weren't well equipped until later on. They were disbanded and then they came back again in 1951, um, following the Soviet threat and so forth. Let me just, have I got that in there? Yeah, I have. Sorry. Just making sure I'm not missing anything. Anyway, today, the UK government are working on a new defence force, or it's a Defence Force UK, a domestic force with a clear mandate. So the new Home Guard, the UK government has announced plans to establish, a new domestic sort of civil defence force, effectively reviving the concept of the Home Guard. So going back to this is what they're saying here. So they're proposing a new Home Guard to protect the UK from attack. Okay, guys, I'm not making any of this up. If the government are making it up because they've got nothing else better to do and they just want to piss everyone off, then that's fine. Okay, I'll stand corrected after all this. But these are the signs that you need to be looking at. Okay, guys, with this information, it must make you sit back and go, right, well, I need to be preparing. I need to make sure that me and my family are prepared for whatever's likely to come. Okay. The primary training roles, let's go back to primary training roles and responsibilities will be for this new home guard is going to be security and observation. So it's going to be patrolling infrastructure, logging anomalies and identifying potential threats, basic tactical response. Now, guys, let me just give you an example of that. Just because we won't see or not likely to see Russian boots on the ground and Russian tanks rolling down our streets, if the shit hits the fan and you get some kind of civil crisis and you get looters and you get this and you get that and all the rest of it, we might have to protect each other from from British people, or you know what I'm saying. So again, we don't have to be talking about sort of the enemy on sort of UK soil. Okay, that there's going to be lots of other reasons why this why the home guard would be sort of in place or sort of placed into sort of various different locations with different duties and responsibilities. Basic tactical response. Okay, so what they're going to be doing is managing crowds during a crisis. So again, that could be the rationing of food, it could be this, it could be that, crowd control. Responding to emergencies, that could be a fire, that could be this, it could be that, and securing perimeters. So again, securing perimeters, a good example of that would be the US Air Force base down in Brize Norton, where the protesters jumped the fence and went off and sprayed the aeroplanes, la 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 la. So that would be a good securing perimeter responsibility. Coordination and reporting, so operating communications equipment, these guys could be doing, and relaying information to the police and sort of control centres. Crisis support, so assisting in logistical roles during civil emergencies such as blackouts, cyber outages. So again, I'm talking cyber warfare or hybrid warfare. We're going to see power cuts, guys. We could see, the water not coming out of our taps and stuff like that. We've got flooding and massive evacuations and stuff like that. Massive evacuations, yes, certainly. If a town, US Air Force base in Oxford gets taken out with a missile, there's going to be evacuations. So, guys, the emergency services and the military aren't going to be able to deal with all this on their own. The likes of you and I are going to have to step up and deal with this. So the recruitment process has a new approach to eligibility. One of the most significant features of this proposal is the broadening of the eligibility. So this includes individuals who are medically or otherwise ineligible for regular service, but are capable and committed to various different domestic duties. That could include I think it's individuals with mild chronic conditions such as asthma, food intolerances, dermatitis, so the people that they're fit for light or moderate sort of physical tasks, but currently excluded from formal military entry. Those with a history of controlled health conditions, including recovered cancer, patients, transplant recipients, or people that are on just sort of stable long-term medications. Guys, actually, I'm going to finish it there. Basically, what I'm trying to point out here is that the new Home Guard is based on the old Home Guard back in World War II. We have to, I don't know, I don't even know how to put this. This is my point, okay? These are the plans that the UK are doing as we speak. These are the same plans based on previous procedures conducted with the run up to and during World War II. So when I say, ladies and gents, get yourselves military fit, as well as, making sure that you can carry out, your preparation duties, you might find yourself also being factored into some kind of voluntary work. See, these are the realities of war, of which most of you, including me, have not experienced in our lifetimes. And that's the reason why people don't believe anything like this is actually going to happen. Don't be complacent. Make sure that you're prepared for, things like power outages, water outages. Make sure that you can survive those scenarios, guys, at the bare minimum. Just make sure that you're ready to do your bit if, I don't know, if your services call upon you. Yeah. That's it. It's a long video. Sorry that it went on for so long. Guys, I just needed to emphasize those 5 points. These are things that the government are doing whilst we're all dancing to TikTok videos and all the rest of it. Get yourselves military fit, infantry aware, keep an ear to the ground and just get yourselves prepared.